Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okonronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks were down today as investors watch the build-up to U.S.-China trade talks cautiously, of course, especially after the U.S. Justice Department leveled criminal charges against Chinese telecom giant Huawei. Now, on the continent, South Africa's JSE up over 1% on the day, minus faring best. There were also some gains in the banking index, largely due to ABSA, which of course was up about 2.72% on news that longtime CEO Maria Ramos will depart at the end of February. In Nigeria, a number of banks dragging the old share into red today. Access Bank, Zenith Bank, GT Bank, all dropping down today. Now, also coming up on the show, we look at the rate of corruption across several African countries. British lawmakers debate amendments to Theresa May's Brexit deal. And we visit a culinary school that trains disadvantaged youth in Morocco. Well, let's begin the show here in Kenya, where the East African country has moved from bad to slightly worse in the 2018 Corruption Perceptions Index in the public sector. Now, Kenya was ranked position 144 out of 180 countries surveyed. Its position tied with Comoros, Guatemala, Mauritania, and Nigeria. Now, according to the report by the Transparency International, Kenya was the fourth most corrupt country in East Africa. Now, according to the index, the sub-Saharan African region is still the worst performing region, mostly because commitment did not translate into concrete progress. While Africa's two largest economies, South Africa and Nigeria, they remained stagnant with just small improvements. And let's discuss this further with Angelo Coppola in Johannesburg and Deji Badmus in Lagos. Very welcome to the show to both of you. Now, Angelo, let's start with you. The index gives South Africa a score of just 43, which is pretty much the same score which it earned back in 2017. But the war on corruption, it seems to be picking up this year in South Africa with, of course, that judicial commission of inquiry into state capture. We've seen it uncover some surprising evidence. So what's your take on the war on corruption in South Africa, especially this year?
Well, we're focused on the Zondo Commission specifically because that's where all the attention is. And in the last 10 days or so, that's increased with the testimony and eyewitness accounts from Angelo Agrizzi, the ex-COO at Bosasa, which was that facilities company that won all those government tenders by nefarious means. He's fingered Watson, who's the ex-CEO, or the present CEO of Bosasa, in bribing the SAA chair, that's the ex-SAA chair, Dudu Myeni, as well as senior correctional services staff and two senior National Prosecuting Authority executives who are currently under judicial inquiry themselves. He's explained that he was responsible for packing the cash bribes into bags for Myeni, the NPA executives and the correctional services people, and keeping records in a little black book. Agrizzi also provisionally ended his testimony today. His colleague is currently giving testimony right now. He's also a fellow whistleblower, the CFO at Bosasa, and he's going to be providing a lot of corroborating evidence based on what Agrizzi has exposed in the last 10 days. Fantonda, of course, is the chap who shot the video on his phone showing the Bosasa boss, Gavin Watson, handling nearly $70,000 worth of cash in a bribe that was going to be paid to the correctional services boss at the time. So lots of corroborating evidence is going to be flowing from that testimony today, which
And certainly a lot of top politicians and government members implicated in that probe. But Deji, in Nigeria, the country did move up about 4 places from 148 to 144 on the perceptions index. But we did see its CPI score. It didn't improve this year from the 27 points that it scored back in 2017. So Deji, are Buhari's steps to combat corruption in the country not yielding desired results?
Well, the government will tell you it is yielding the desired result, but that, those results are very, very slow in coming because For instance, most of these corruption cases will have to go through the judicial process, and you know, the windmill of justice, if you like, in this part of the world actually grinds slowly, and that's one of the reasons why the government says is decided to go after some corrupt judges, so to speak. But the fact is that there are quite some challenges still in place. I mean, as we said, for instance, from the report from Transparency International, it basically says you still have situations where contracts, you know, get overbloated. You still have you know, the lack of transparency now in the use of security votes. So it's not as if corruption has been eliminated, and it's not as if, you know, the challenge isn't there. And that's exactly what this result is about. But no question at all that some people would be celebrating this, especially supporters of the government, that, well, even if at all, you know, you look at the CPI score, that it remains unchanged at 27. The fact that it did not go down, some would tell you it's something to celebrate about. But fact is that there's still a lot of work for this government to do in terms of fighting corruption. One of the biggest reasons why Nigerians voted for President Buhari was his promise to fight corruption. Now, that fight has not gone too smoothly. There's been accusation against his government, for instance, that his government is shielding party supporters now who are perceived to be corrupt, that he's not done enough now to, you know, fight corruption within his own cabinet. So that, of course, is still a challenge, and I think it's, you know, these are some of the things that Transparency International is looking at, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, the score, the CPI score especially, has remained stagnated, if you like. And I think it's a clear message to the government that it needs to redouble its effort. But it also depends on how Nigerians now, because this is an election year, elections will be coming up very soon. So how Nigerians interpret this, and how they take it now, take it out against the government. We just have to wait and see.
And as, of course, Transparency International is saying, commitment is not translating into concrete progress. So, Angelo, we've seen a long list of senior ANC politicians as well as government officials. They've been implicated in these inquiries into state capture. The big question now is, will we see serious legal repercussions after all is said and done?
Well, look, there are two schools of thought here, Uche. The first narrow academic approach is that the DCJ Zondo Commission, that's he's the Deputy Chief Justice Commission, must finish his work and then provide a diagnosis and a prescription. The downside here is that the Commission still has 18 months left to complete its work, and then Zondo has to compile all of that evidence and prepare his report. It could take years before we see anything there. The other school of thought suggests that there's enough evidence to proceed with a prosecution or two, or maybe even three, but not within the scope of the Zondo Commission. We have heard today from Agritzi himself that he's been talking to SARS, and that's the tax collecting agency. They're interested because of the tax evasion activities of at least 38 of the people that Agritzi has named in his last 9 days. Those who took bribes and also took undeclared gifts and incentives. He's also talking to the Hawks, and this could speed up any criminal cases that the NPA, that's the National Prosecuting Authority, might pursue. There's also the 10-year-old SIU investigation into Bosasa, which was stonewalled by a compromised NPA official for, like I said, a decade. That investigation report has been ready to go for years. So we could see legal action sooner, or perhaps not. And
Deji, President Buhari will be seeking re-election next month, and of course we know his main contender is former Vice President and businessman Atiku Abubakar. So how do Nigerians, Deji, feel that this new leadership could impact, how this new leadership could impact the country's fight on corruption?
Well, if there's one man, to be candid, if you put both men on a scale, and you ask Nigerians who they think or think has that genuine commitment to fight corruption, they would still tell you it's President Buhari. He's very popular for that. He's widely regarded as a man of integrity, the kind of integrity I would say Atiku Abubakar unfortunately doesn't so much have, especially when you consider the kind of thing now that happened when he was vice president under President Olusegun Obasanjo, and then President Obasanjo, of course, wrote some damning things about him. That is a huge challenge for him, and the issue of perception, he's perceived to be corrupt. It's something that he's still struggling to deal with, so that is certainly there. But in the case of President Buhari, it's not so, but a lot of people will tell you that, look, part of the problem that President Buhari has is that he's probably old, that if he was younger, much younger now, that things might probably have been different. And the fact that you look at the process, I mean, the people now in his party, the people, I mean, there are some people within his party who are perceived to be very corrupt, and it appears the president is not demonstrating that strong political will now to go after them. People are waiting to see if he got a second term, whether he'd be able to do that. It's the issue of anti-corruption will definitely, it's a big topic now as we speak on the campaign trail, and it certainly would weigh so much on the minds of some voters as they go to, elect who the next president would be. But in terms of, people's perception now as to which of those two men actually has that strong will now to fight corruption, I would say a lot of people still believe it's President Buhari.
Well, many thanks to both of you for your insights. Of course, Angelo Coppola joining us there in South Africa, and Deji Badmus joining us there in Lagos. Now, meanwhile, in South Africa, state-owned electricity supplier Eskom is currently on a roadshow to explain its need for another tariff increase. Now, at the same time, the board and a task team are investigating ways of making the utility more efficient. Here's Angelo Coppola with more.
South African labour unions have been suspicious of government intentions around breaking up the utility or privatising it.
First of all, we reject that proposal with the contempt it deserves. We've been suspecting for the longest time as NUMSA that government's plan all along has been privatisation. They've been speaking about it all of last year. We found the denials quite bizarre, to be frank, because it was very obvious that this was the course which they were going to take.
Others disagree, suggesting there's a solution that could work for all concerned.
You should have a transmission network like roads or like railways or like airline routes or whatever, on which different people transport electricity. We should separate the transmission so that we can have a proper way of charging and costing the purchase, generation, distribution, supply of electricity.
One think tank has been calling for the breakup of the utility for more than 2 decades.
The rest of the world now is energy markets, energy trading. Those that are still state-owned have been broken up into different means of production, distribution, and of course the grid transmission. And this is something that should have been done long, long ago.
Government is pursuing a range of strategies to make Eskom more efficient. It has the board looking at a turnaround strategy, and the president has appointed a task team to have oversight of that strategy.
If Eskom was run properly, with clean leadership, with a board that is not made up of the ANC cronies who have proven themselves to be corrupt for more than 2 decades, but if the boards of these SOEs actually made up of people like members of the community, right? You have also representation from unions and labor and business. Then that's when we'll get actual transparency about how decisions are made.
It will require engineers, not financiers and insurers and all sorts of other people running it. And if it is focused on engineering, solving the engineering problems, getting the maintenance going at the power stations, and it stops buying electricity from so-called renewable wind and solar for roughly 2 rand and selling it for less than 1 rand, that would be a start.
As we wait for those final proposals, everyone's wondering whether Eskom can in fact be saved. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now a look at our corporate headlines today. South African lender Absa has announced that its CEO, Maria Ramos, will retire at the end of February. Now, the announcement sent the bank's shares higher by 3% as traders saw this as a chance for a fresh start. Renee van Wyk will become interim chief executive with effect effect from March until a permanent appointment is made. And diamond mining multinational De Beers reported a big drop of $167 million in diamond sales. Now, according to the miner's CEO, Bruce Cleaver, the decline was the result of a bigger than normal sale in December and low-value goods moving slowly through the industry's pipeline. Diamond miners are struggling across the board, especially those producing cheaper and smaller gems where there is too much supply. And Johannesburg Stock Exchange listed mining firm Gemfield has announced it will pay $7.6 million to settle claims brought against it by a group of Mozambicans. Now, the claims relate to a mining concession in northern Mozambique. The money will be paid on a no admission of liability basis. The Mozambicans argued that they and their relatives were victims of human rights abuses at or around the Montupes Ruby Mining Limitada's mine. And China has strongly urged the United States to stop the unreasonable suppression of Chinese companies, including Huawei. This comes after the U.S. brought criminal charges against the tech firm. Now, they include conspiring to violate U.S. sanctions on Iran by doing business with Tehran. And in another case, the Justice Department says Huawei stole robotic technology from carrier T-Mobile US. Now, Huawei has repeated warnings that it could move its business elsewhere if the United States continues with its hostilities. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. And we're heading into a short break now, still coming up on the show. Kenya launches an ambitious plan to curb traffic congestion in Nairobi CBD. And Egypt secures deals worth billions of dollars during a state visit by the French president.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in. See, business in Africa is high risk. After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okonronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN. Welcome back. Now, Kenya's government has launched the Bus Rapid Transport System, or BRT, in an effort to fast-track movement of cargo and passengers across the metropolitan. With the congestion around the city, the government has offered an alternative that will seek to control the traffic flow around the city. Now, the move, of course, has drawn mixed feelings amongst the residents of Nairobi. And Penina Karibe tells us more.
Every day, about 3 million vehicles drive into Nairobi's central business district. But with limited spaces to accommodate these vehicles, congestion has become the norm. To address this, the government has announced what it calls a workable solution. It has created 2 car-free days starting 1st of February, Wednesday and Saturday of each week. But this ambitious plan has received mixed reactions here in the streets.
I'm supporting it because for those people who are doing trading, they're actually going to grow the economy, probably make about 40 million in a day, which translates to maybe 40 billion in a year. So I think once in a while, let's leave our cars, come and do shopping and support the common mwananchi.
It is not a good thing because people like the motorcycle operators are small business people who are trying to make a living, so they should have allowed them into the central business district instead of pushing them out, which can see them result into criminal activities.
On these 2 days, hawkers will be allowed into the CBD to sell their wares. In a move the government hopes will generate an annual income of $38 million.
I think there's a lot of misinformation. They have mentioned about 3 or 4 streets: Harambee Avenue, part of Moi Avenue, City Hall. I don't know where the other place is, which doesn't seem to be, to be a reason to lock vehicles outside. So there must be proper information given by the PS, as opposed to just give a blanket statement on CBD. CBD, we don't know where the boundaries are.
Organized car-free days are held in various cities across the world. For instance, it was introduced in Kigali, Rwanda in mid-2016 and is held on the first Sunday of every month. This is the start for Kenya, and if successful, it will be a real milestone in sorting out the transport chaos in this bustling city. Penina Karibe, CGTN in Nairobi, Kenya.
Let's get some more insight into this story. We're joined now by Constant Akap, an urban planning expert. He joins us now in the studio. Very welcome.
Thank you.
Well, let's start with your thoughts on how the Kenyan government has been implementing this ban on vehicles in the CBD, as well as the rollout of the bus rapid transport system.
It's quite interesting that they brought both of them at the same time, that both topics came up at the same time. And well, they're linked together because they're both under this whole idea we have globally of transformative urban mobility, which is a key word we need to use in our discussion, mobility. How do we want people to move around the city from one place to another? But the objectives of which are slightly different when you go into the finer details, because the objectives of the bus rapid transit will be slightly different from the objectives of a car-free city. First of all, let's look at the idea of a car-free city. It's unfortunate that a lot of the news that has come out has talked about people walking to work, or the entire CBD being closed up, or no cars being allowed in Nairobi. We've seen all sorts of things on social media and in the news. And the Cabinet Secretary clarified it yesterday that they're going to close about 3 streets. And he mentioned City Hallway, he mentioned Harambee Avenue and part of Moi Avenue. And this is simply one of the ways in which we try to make our streets more pedestrian friendly by at times occasionally closing them up, taking into consideration environmental benefits of that, taking into consideration health benefits of that. We have we're almost getting to a crisis point with our air quality in the city, especially in certain parts.
Right.
And also considering the social aspect of it. Fortunately, I have been part of a team that has done such attempts in the past, as far as car-free days are concerned. In Nairobi, we've in the past closed part of Mwingi Street as part of what we call the Nairobi Placemaking Week, which is an annual 1-week event that we hold to create awareness on some of these activities.
But sorry to interrupt you. Yeah. You did mention that it has been attempted before. And we do know that Nairobi's governor did try and implement a ban on public transport vehicles, matatus, and it pretty much backfired. So what does that say about that plan?
The plan to get and designated lanes, it has to take into account a much wider perspective of things. On the ground, you require stations. I'm sure in Lagos, if you've used it, you've got this platform level stations like in Dar es Salaam. You've got a prepaid system that also happens in Dar and in South Africa. Another important thing that has to be taken into consideration with any transportation system is a land use plan of the area. Fortunately, Nairobi does have the Nairobi Integrated Urban Development Plan that was launched 5 years ago. And it's unfortunate we're not seeing enough discussions around the implementation of some of the proposals of the Nairobi Integrated Urban Development Plan. Because if we were to move forward with that, all these things are there. The proposed light rail system is there. The proposal to have bus rapid, the 5 bus rapid transit lanes are there, among other ideas.
And what are your thoughts on some of the government's other plans? They're looking at other initiatives to decongest the city, car-free days, as they're doing Wednesday and I think Saturday, and the purchase of diesel-modified trains. What are your thoughts on these plans and where they should be implemented in the city?
I would see the diesel trains as almost an extension of the current rail system that we have. That carries about 25,000 people a day or more, slightly more, possibly towards 30,000 people a day. And there is need for this, particularly in some of the eastern part of the city. Okay. The eastern part of the city has a much higher population than the northern and western part of the city. And there is huge potential for rail transit and rail links to the current rail system. It may not even be to creating a new light rail system. We may just have to link it to current rail system. The Integrated Development Plan gives proposals of a light rail system, part of which covers also the western part of the city. Going back in time, the 1973 plan also gave a proposal of a light rail system that started at the eastern side of the city and went across towards Ngong Road and
never got implemented,
but did not get implemented. So it's very positive to hear the government coming up now with ideas that they're actually thinking of what we can call multiple mobility options, multiple mobility alternatives. So we have bus rapid transit in mind. We're thinking of limiting the number of vehicles accessing the CBD, which if we have the good public transit system, people will be forced to use that public transit system. Nairobi County has a non-motorized transit policy that unfortunately it has not been implementing, which requires it to put part of its budget into its transport budget and transport and infrastructure budget into non-motorized transit, which we would be talking of pedestrians and cyclists having easier access around the city.
So I guess it's great to see them implementing some of these projects, but it's about how they implement it moving forward.
How they implement, how they communicate to people. People need to understand how these things work.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us in the studio. Unfortunately, we do have to leave it there. Of course, that was Constant Cap. He's an urban planning expert. Well, let's shift focus now. French President Emmanuel Macron has concluded his visit to Egypt. Now, despite trading blows over human rights records, the two nations have signed business agreements worth billions of dollars. Here's CGTN's Adel Maroui with more from Cairo.
Egypt bagged business agreements worth $1.8 billion during French President Emmanuel Macron's visit this week. In total, the two countries signed 40 agreements. The biggest of the 40 agreements signed in total is a $385 million dedicated to complete Egypt's third metro line, $327 million of which are a French grant to connect the underground network to Cairo's airport.
President El-Sisi wants to expand the trade and economic ties with France. He believes the ties will grow in the coming period. In 2015, Egypt was France's third most important African trading and investment partner. Egypt has a market with promising revenues.
The agreements include the re-establishment of the French University in Egypt, a $57 million loan to support medium, small and micro businesses led by women. France's Agency for Development has also pledged an additional $1 billion until 2023 to support various social development projects in Egypt.
The agreements reflect how essential Egypt is to France in the Middle East and Africa. As a leading regional influence on both political and economic fronts, this economic cooperation is expected to grow. There are upcoming French investments expected in the Suez Canal economic zone.
Trade between the two countries is now valued at more than $2 billion annually. Egyptian exports to France have increased exponentially. They increased by more than 56% last year. With about $5 billion in direct investments, France is the second largest European partner in Egypt. The government says that since it amended the investment laws, French investments in Egypt nearly doubled. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's head into a short break now. Still to come. British lawmakers debate amendments to Theresa May's Brexit deal. And the U.S. economy loses around $11 billion due to its record government shutdown.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest minds in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Now here's a recap of today's top headlines. An explosion in central Mogadishu has claimed the lives of 2 people and injured 5 others. Now Al-Shabaab says it targeted security personnel in that attack, raising fresh concerns amongst Somali authorities. And in Nigeria, escalating attacks by the Boko Haram group have forced more than 30,000 people to flee to Cameroon. Now the UN says the refugees left the northeast town of Ran over the weekend and crossed into the neighboring country, and that's after soldiers from a regional military force withdrew from the area. And the United States has given the Venezuelan opposition control of certain assets, which of course are being held by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The U.S. government imposed sanctions on Venezuelan state-owned oil firm PDVSA following allegations of fraud and embezzlement by President Nicolas Maduro's regime. And that's a recap of today's headlines. Now, On the international front, the Congressional Budget Office in Washington says the government shutdown has cost the U.S. economy about $11 billion. But while many small businesses suffered over the 35-day standoff, the overall impact on GDP was smaller than expected. CGTN's Giles Gibson tells us the details.
The food trucks in Washington's Farragut Square are picking up their last few customers after the busy lunch hour. Tokyo in the city serves up steaming hot ramen noodles from its tiny mobile kitchen. They're busy now, but the truck's owners are still reeling from a difficult month.
The weather's not that good right now, but we still get an average of like 50 customers a day. But since the shutdown, some days we'll get like 6 customers. The lowest we got was like 3 customers. There's even days that we don't even go out because it was so bad, so we just go back home. It's not even worth it.
As soon as Democrats and Republicans reached a deal to reopen the government last week, business quickly went back to normal.
Many of the federal workers who come here to eat at these food trucks will also receive full back pay. The truck's owners, though, won't be able to make back their lost revenue.
The White House originally predicted the shutdown would cost $1.2 billion per week. But the Congressional Budget Office found that 8 of the $11 billion lost will be made up as federal employees get back to work. So while small businesses suffered, the big picture was less painful than originally predicted by the Trump administration.
Well, I think those original estimates were way out of whack with what was actually going on, right? The number of people who weren't getting paid was in the hundreds of thousands, maybe in the millions if you were really pushing the numbers. Of course, the U.S. population is a lot larger than that.
Number one, they can't do it for
Last week, President Trump signed legislation that will only fund the government for 21 days, raising the prospect of more brinkmanship. So as small businesses like Tokyo in the city count the cost of this shutdown, they're left wondering if another is just around the corner. Giles Gibson, CGTN, Washington.
And meanwhile, in the UK, lawmakers have been debating amendments to Theresa May's Brexit deal in the House of Commons. Several changes have been made to the Parliament to the deal, but there are concerns that it may be a little too late to present a new deal to the EU.
Now, I understand the concerns that have led to these amendments being tabled, but I have the most profound doubts about the consequences they would lead to. Both amendments seek to create and exploit mechanisms that allow Parliament to usurp the proper role of the executive. Such actions would be unprecedented and could have far-reaching and long-term implications for the way the United Kingdom is governed and for the balance of powers and responsibilities in our democratic institutions. And I'm sure that as former Ministers of the Crown, both of these right honourable members must know this. So while I do not question their sincerity in trying to avoid a no-deal Brexit, to seek to achieve this through such means is, I believe, deeply misguided and not a responsible course of action. This amendment will give the mandate I need to negotiate with Brussels an arrangement that commands a majority in this House. One that ensures we leave with a deal and addresses the House's concerns while guaranteeing no return to the hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. What I'm talking about is not a further exchange of letters, but a significant and legally binding change to the withdrawal agreement.
Of course, we'll bring you updates on that vote as they come in. Meanwhile, 2019 heralds the launch of 2 major trade deals. One is the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal without the United States. The other deal that begins on Friday signifies new ties between Japan and the EU. Now, Tokyo has spearheaded both agreements in a move that some experts are saying is a challenge to U.S. global leadership. Here's Mayu Yoshida with more.
Kai Kato has only been a farmer for 2 years, a big change from his previous job as a systems developer. He grows more than 160 types of vegetables and produces olive oil from scratch. But unlike many traditional Japanese farmers, Kato is digitally connected, using social media to promote his organic products, which he sells in Tokyo every weekend. It's also exposed him to the bubble that is Japanese agriculture, an industry still wary about opening up to new markets, which is exactly what new free trade agreements will do.
Coming from a different industry, I have noticed that there are very few farmers with business mindsets. Other sectors like fashion retailers or automakers are already competing with overseas rivals, but farmers were protected for years. TPP is a good opportunity to enhance competition in the farming sector.
The deals will see Japanese farmers able to tap into other corners of the world, but in exchange, other nations will also be able to sell their produce in Japan. Kato, though, sees a competitive edge, especially when cleaner, high-quality local goods are lined up against some imports sprayed with pesticides.
Japan is hoping the free trade agreements will be a game changer for its economy. Experts say it's a big win for consumers, and farmers like Kato believe rising competition will improve safety standards and the quality of their produce. But other farmers fear they will lose business because of an influx of cheaper imports.
The latest figures show Japan's agriculture sector exports less than 10% of its output. Free trade agreements could crack that open. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe believes FTAs are vital to his Abenomics economic policies amid the shrinking domestic market. Globally, they're being hailed as an antidote against protectionism, especially after the U.S. retreated from the 12-nation deal.
And so this could be a model FTA for the future FTAs. This will be very important, not just for Japan, but for other countries as well. Having CPTPP put into force is a very important way to fight against this rising protectionism.
The TPP-11 together cover 500 million people, more than 13% of the world's GDP. And it's already attracting new members such as Thailand, South Korea, and even the UK post-Brexit. Meanwhile, another big FTA between the European Union and Japan will come to effect in February, this one covering nearly 1/3 of the world's GDP. Experts say if more countries join these new trading blocs, it'll send a powerful message to President Trump that free trade can go on without the U.S. Mayu Yoshida, CGTN, Kanagawa Prefecture, Japan.
And let's move on now. China and the United Arab Emirates already have deep ties in oil and gas. But China's pathway into Middle Eastern markets now also includes taxis. Here's Jacob Greaves explaining.
There's a new taxi venture in Dubai, and it's made in China. One Road Taxis recently become only the 7th licensed firm allowed to operate in the Emirate. Currently, they have around 100 operational cars, but hope to rapidly expand, bringing other Chinese brands along for the ride.
The next step for us is to manage around 2,000 taxis here in Dubai in order to create a more convenient way of life for citizens. Since cars manufactured in China with high quality has gained great popularity worldwide, we'd love to introduce more Chinese cars to Dubai. The Chinese automobile brand Hongqi plays a leading role in the Chinese markets due to its high quality and stable performance, so we would introduce more Hongqi cars into the Dubai market to enrich the current car selection.
The timing is far from a coincidence. Fast approaching is a major global event being held in Dubai, set to draw in business. For any taxi firm operating in Dubai, particularly a new one, there's one key moment to prepare for: Expo 2020, a world fair being held by the Emirate. It hopes will attract well over 20 million visitors. The new taxi firm is part of parent company One Road, which has operated in the UAE for years. They speak of using a growing taxi fleet to help build a business ecosystem in Dubai.
For the advertising for this LCD screen, we're going to place all the LCD screen on the rooftop of the taxi. So this is just only like the platform. We are building one channel. After that, we're going to attract the customers to promote their brand through our advertising.
They're also building a booking app, but One Road is not assured a smooth ride. App-based Uber and its Gulf competitor Careem both already operate in the UAE, not to mention the other meter-based firms, though the market does appear to be accelerating. In 2018, taxi bookings alone through Dubai's Road and Transport Authority hit a record 12 million. That's up 17% on 2017, and the Emirate is attempting to grow its fleet with Expo 2020 on the horizon. One Road now has the green light to compete for that business. Jacob Greaves, the CGTN in Dubai.
Well, let's go back now to one of our top stories of the day. Of course, British lawmakers have been debating in the House of Commons amendments to Theresa May's Brexit deal. Let's get the latest from Richard Bestick. He now joins us in London. Great to see you, Richard. Now, a number of different amendments on the table today. Some of the key ones include tweaking May's first deal and returning to the EU for talks, as well as delaying a Brexit, and also looking for alternatives to that Irish backstop. So, Richard, based on where the cards lie right now, is it clear what kind of Brexit deal will win the most support today?
If only it were, Uche. The MPs, the members of Parliament, will begin voting in around about 10 minutes from now. It really looks like Theresa May's Brexit battles in Parliament are becoming something of a war of attrition. She made clear to the members of Parliament that despite that loss 2 weeks ago, when she lost by a whopping 230 votes, that was purely telling the world what Parliament didn't want. And the votes today, she says, should tell Brussels what they do want. So she's given her back into a so-called Brady Amendment, which will put in place alternatives to the backstop that's so unpopular with MPs in Parliament, particularly those Brexit MPs. If she gets that, and we don't know if she will yet, if she gets that, then she says she'll be off to Brussels to negotiate the withdrawal agreement all over again. Well, Uche, she's got 2 months until Britain crashes out of the European Union, and it took her 2 years more than to agree that withdrawal agreement that was so roundly rejected by Parliament just 2 weeks ago. So it'll be difficult. And what kind of reception will she get when she arrives in Brussels? That's the question.
Quite right, Richard, because the EU leaders have been pretty clear that the withdrawal agreement cannot be redrafted right now. So is this vote coming a little too late now?
When do we want it? Now! When do we want Brexit? When do we want it? Now! Well, it is, and there is a big worry in Parliament that Britain will crash out without an agreement, with all the economic chaos that would ensue from that. That's why there is an amendment down, when they start voting, an amendment down which looks like it might get through, which will effectively stop the clock on Brexit. It could delay it for 9 months, so that the British Parliament will have some way of getting an agreement together. Theresa May, the UK Prime Minister, doesn't like that one because it takes authority, it takes responsibility, it takes power away from the executive wing of government and puts it in Parliament, that old clash between Parliament and the executive. It could, if it is though successful, Uche, have me standing here talking to you this time next Christmas. We could still be going on about Brexit. That's the consequence of it.
Well, we're certainly watching. Many thanks, Richard, for your time. Thank you for joining us. Richard Bestick joining us there in London. Well, let's shift focus now. Take a look at our commodity prices today. Gold climbing to a 7-month high as markets opted for caution before some major macro events which are expected this week. Oil prices were up following a move by Washington to impose sanctions on Venezuelan state-owned oil firm PDVSA. Now, the decision may curb the OPEC members' crude exports. However, a further rise in the oil price was capped by ample global supply and certainly signs of a slowing Asian economy. Let's head into a short break now. Still coming up. We visit a culinary school that trains disadvantaged youth in Morocco. And Mercedes-Benz announces plans to assemble vehicles in Egypt.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. it has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys. The greatest sights. The greatest adventures.
Here in Canada, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
And let's head to Morocco now. Young people from the city of Saleh in the country's northwest have been offered free training at a cooking school. Now, the project aims to provide youth from disadvantaged backgrounds with culinary skills so that they can become employable and self-sufficient. Take a look.
This is the Shamsi Culinary Arts School in Saleh. Around 50 young people will spend 2 years here learning how to cook up a storm. It's funded by the National Initiative for Human Development and various charities.
Thanks to the association, we could save the young people of Saleh. Currently, some of the young people don't feel like they have a future.
The first year covers the basics, and in their second year, students choose which cuisine to specialize in. One of the most popular is Moroccan cuisine, which includes pastry making.
When I had nothing to do and stayed home all the time, I had no idea about my future. But after my registration in the school to learn French pastry, I have dreams and goals to achieve now.
The apprentices have a great willingness to learn. I noticed a big improvement in their work from the beginning until now. They can cook and bake alone. We help so that they can work and start a career.
The school has helped keep many disadvantaged youths off the streets. After they graduate, the school also helps to place the new chefs in hotels and restaurants. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
And let's go to Egypt now. German automobile manufacturer Mercedes-Benz has revealed plans to assemble vehicles in the country. Now, the announcement has been hailed in the North African nation. Sharp fluctuations in the market, as well as limits on foreign currency transfers, had previously forced the auto giant out of the country. Well, Adele El-Maroui tells us why they're back.
Mercedes-Benz says it's closely cooperating with the Egyptian government, looking into the possibility of starting a new assembly line. The entire Egyptian government, including President El-Sisi, are keen to give Mercedes all the facilitation it needs. A comeback from such a leading company will definitely reflect on the economy.
Mercedes say Egypt is a safe market to invest in. Promising economy has well-trained and cheap workforce. That move will encourage more companies to come and produce in Egypt. If things move well, I think Mercedes will consider manufacturing new models in Egypt for the Arab and African market.
Mercedes used to assemble cars in Egypt back in 2009 by the complete knockdown method, which was a revolutionary step for the North African country. By 2015, however, political unrest, currency crisis and economic challenges have driven the company away.